What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel, and we are doing another storyteller tips video, except this one is a little bit more about running a game and a little bit less about running Clocktower specifically, because I want to talk about, as a storyteller, what do you do when a player leaves the game early? Now, there's going to be a couple of different scenarios where this will happen, and then kind of what you should do is going to be a bit more specific to each scenario and kind of how you need to solve this problem, because it happens, right? Sometimes it can happen really innocently. The person is like, oh no, I had something come up, I have to leave, and it's going to be different in person and it's going to be different online, so I want to talk about it. Now, there's been a few really bad games where people have abandoned. I think originally called Passing On, where you're like, no, I don't care, I just want to leave. I don't care what happens to my boat, I don't have this many info, it doesn't matter, I want to go. Which is similar to like a traveler leaving the game. And sometimes it's announced, sometimes it's not announced, and then what information you have as a storyteller to deal with this problem is going to inform how you solve it. So the first thing really is trying to identify why that person has left. Are they coming back? Playing with the online client, people disconnect all of the time, and sometimes they will come back. Sometimes they will just quit the game, which is difficult to tell if it's a disconnection or it isn't. So usually, if they've been gone for a little bit too long for it to be a disconnection, you should reach out to them. You should message them in the group chat and be like, hey, is everything okay? And reaching out to them will give you an indication of what's going on. If you message them and go, actually, no, I'm not okay, that was really shit, this is what happened, this is what I'm upset about, you have something that you can potentially resolve to solve a game. I've had games where I'm storytelling and I've left the game. It's really rough sometimes having to deal with certain things because in some ways you as the storyteller, you are a guest here performing something as a gift to a lot of the players in a way. We are leveraging your skills and your time so that they can have a fun time and run the game. And yes, there is some trade-off for you where storytelling often is critiqued as being the most fun role, but you still have to manage a wild pack of animals a lot of the time to make the game happen. And so let's kind of run through some scenarios and some solutions of kind of what to do. The first one is something happens and a person has to leave. You need to assess how critical they are to the game and the distance from the beginning of the game. If it's like the first 10 minutes, it's the first day, nothing that much has happened, a re-rack is a totally valid choice. Or reaching out and finding a substitute also works fine. When you're playing online, it's a lot easier to find a substitute. When you're playing in person, it's a lot harder to do that. And sometimes it's really hard to communicate what was known to the new player. As a storyteller, you can kind of communicate them what information they were supposed to receive, but you can't communicate what they've been told. Let's say they're the demon and there's the spy, and the spy's told the demon the whole grimoire. You can't go and re-give that information to them. You just have to let them rerun it as a fresh person. But you can do stuff like giving extra time in the day so that they can have those conversations to potentially keep it going. And your decision to re-rack can be determined based on how critical that character was. Like if they are the demon, maybe you want to err on the side of re-rack or whatever. It can muddy a game and make it a bit harder to kind of figure out what's going on if you have to replace a player. The other thing is that as a storyteller, you always have this tool of saying that you've messed something up and you have to re-rack. You taking responsibility as a storyteller, as having made a mistake, is much better than players feeling bad about something that's happened. It's a thing that I do a lot, where I will just happily take the blame. I don't give a shit. It's fine. I'll solve it on my own time. I'll worry about it. I'll talk to people and I'll apologize and all this kind of stuff, which is always what I'll do. I'll always be like, hey, look, sorry, this sucked, or I made a mistake and this didn't work out. You were kind of bullied a little bit. It wasn't my intention. And kind of have that debrief conversation where you apologize and you look, this wasn't, but regardless of how much it's your fault. Like, I've had really shit games before, but I always, regardless of whether I feel like I'm the perpetrator, reach out and try to apologize to people and be like, look, it sucks. I don't like how it kind of worked out like this. I don't want us to have any bad will. I'm really sorry that this is kind of how it happened and, you know, how things were interpreted or whatever. Because I think that's best practice. And I've always been like that. I don't want people to be upset with me over a game. The point is to have fun, right? Now, if we're much later into the game, we're on the final day or whatever, it's a bit harder to say, okay, we'll re-rack, right? There is one game in particular, and I know for a fact I did not upload it to the channel, well, I hope, where basically we had a player leave. It wasn't clear if they were coming back or not, and we had already waited 10 minutes for them to return. And they were non-critical to the game. And so when asked, I had recounted things that they had said publicly previously. I basically said, hello, I'm impersonating this person. This is the thing that they know and have said before, and kind of keep it, just to keep the game rolling, which is a choice that I made, right? Like I had already reached out for substitutes. We didn't get a reply within the 10 minutes. I had reached out to them and they had not replied in the 10 minutes. And so I just tried to keep the game going because it was the final day and it was much closer to the finale than it was to the beginning. And when they came back, they're like, well, that wasn't cool. I don't like that you did that. You either just wait or you get a substitute or you end the game. And I'm like, I understand. I obviously made a choice to keep things going because I have to weigh the other 11 players versus you, right? I'm stuck with that awkward choice where either 11 people get an incomplete game and they've wasted 40 minutes, or you get to come back and be grumpy with me. And a lot of the time, there isn't really a correct choice there. Sometimes that person isn't super important. If they're the guy being nominated, you try and wait for as long as you can. There's only so much that you can do, but also as a storyteller, you might have the vibe that the entire town has already made up their mind. There's really nothing that guy could have said that changed their minds. Maybe it's just better to let the game end in a disappointing ending and move on and go next game or whatever. And be like, look, I'm sorry, that's how it played out. This was the best I could do under the circumstances. I just didn't want to have everyone sitting here waiting for a super long amount of time for them to come back. We couldn't get a substitute or whatever. And it's kind of rough. As for the one time where I left the game as the storyteller, you have kind of like a duty of care towards your players, right? And it's your job to try and manage things for them so that they're having a good time, which means giving quieter players the opportunity to talk, giving people, you know, space to do their bit, making sure that people aren't being bullied unfairly. And it is a bit hard to be like, hey guys, chill, you know. But sometimes you can be like, look, things are getting a little bit heated, or I can see this person's getting upset. Maybe we should move the conversation away from them. It is difficult to step in as a storyteller and do these kinds of things. But when the ire is directed at you, the storyteller, you have very few allies to solve your problems. And basically, something had happened in the game. I don't remember, this was a while ago. We were playing online. Something had happened in the game, and one of the players in particular was very unhappy about it. And they got up in the private chat with me, and they're like, I'm upset that you've done this. You should never, ever do this. And I demand that you do this thing to solve it. And I'm like, well, no, that's not in the best interest of the game. I can't just, you know, have this conceit to you because you're angry at me and demanding that of me. I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is say, hi, I've made a mistake that's so devastating to the game state, I'm going to end the game. And me taking responsibility for having done something wrong. And the player goes, no, that's making me look like I've come and asked you to end the game, which makes me look like an asshole. I don't want you to do that either. And I'm like, I'm not going to give you the thing that you asked for because that's equally detrimental. And I have to only take responsibility. That's the only thing that I can do. And I just go, hey, look, I've made a mistake and I have to re-rack. I'm sorry, everyone, right? Which is why we leave the group chat. I go, hey, everyone, look, I'm really sorry. I've made a mistake. I have to do the re-rack. I clear the grimoire. I go, you know, give me a minute. I'm going to go ahead and set up the next game. And the guy goes, no, you're not going to do that. This is what's going to happen. You're going to reset it and we're going to fix it the way that I want. And it's like, well, first of all, you're not in charge. I'm the one that makes the decisions. But I'm also not here to fight you. I'm here to try and run a game for you where you're having fun. You're not having fun. You as a player are not creating a great atmosphere. So I'm not going to run the game. I'm just going to leave. and that's sometimes the best choice, right? Sometimes you have to look at conflicts and how you can resolve conflicts, and sometimes just not being there is the resolution to it. Maybe the issue is just with me, that guy just hates me or something. How am I supposed to know? I can't solve that, and I can't. In that scenario, I was like, "There's no way I can just do what you want to solve the game, because it isn't a fix, right? It's just will not accomplish what you want, because I know everything, and they obviously don't know everything because they are a player, and it's hard to always make the right choice, right? It's hard to always make the right choice, but I think making the choice where you are doing your best to kind of keep a positive relationship with as many players as possible is kind of the choice. Sometimes Clocktower plays out where people are put in a situation where they are a bit bullied, they're a bit targeted by stuff a bit unfairly, and that can suck. And sometimes you're just like, it's whatever. It happens. I need a game to cool off. I'll even, maybe I'll come play the next one or whatever. And I get that, and it happens. But that also means that you as a player need to assess that you're like, damn, actually, that did kind of suck. I had a game recently where I was the amnesiac. I received absolutely no indication as to what my ability was doing. I had no idea what was going on. I died immediately. I spent the whole game knowing nothing and doing nothing. I'm like, I can't interact with anything. I can't solve anything. This is kind of lame, right? And sometimes that happens. It's whatever. It's not my turn to have all the fun, right? Which is fine. And I'm here to facilitate things for other players and engage in solving the puzzle and field theories and try and solve things. I'm not eliminated entirely. I just don't have any personal information that does stuff. And recognize, no, like, that was a bit lame or whatever. Am I good to go and play the next game? Is my mental a bit drained? Am I just a bit tired? Did I have lunch today? Am I a bit grumpy? Should I maybe sit the next one out? It's all things worth considering, but you're also trying to assess this for the other players, right? Are they truly upset? Like, did I really run a game that was so dog shit that they want to fight me? They want to stab me or whatever. I'm trying to pick what the worst possible, and it's not actually a thing that's happened. I'm trying to think of what the angriest a person could be. They want to leap over the table and strangle me. Like, what? How bad is the game actually? How can I possibly solve this? Is it solvable and the game can continue? Otherwise, and I will usually default to this option of I am sorry, I have made a mistake that's catastrophic. We cannot continue. I will happily, set up and run a new game if people want. Otherwise, I'm happy for another story to take over. But look, this game cannot continue. It is completed. As an online storyteller, you have the super powerful tool of clearing the grimoire, which means that even if a storyteller takes over, they cannot continue the game state. And it means that no matter what happens, there's a kind of a mental reset. But some of the players are still going to be kind of angry. So maybe reaching out to them and be like, hey, look, I'm really sorry about what's happened. Let's try not to hold on to this, and we'll kind of try and move on. We'll do something different. It can be a bit rough. People do get a bit grumpy, and that can kind of happen. And the best thing you can kind of do is, try and employ some conflict resolution strategies, try and talk to people, get an understanding for what went wrong, especially if you're a newer storyteller and a player's having a really bad time for some reason. Finding out what they thought the problem was. They're like, you made this choice that was really bad, or I was, put in the nightmare dimension of this one thing. I was in a game where I was the poison savant and everyone else's information made no sense, and my information made a little bit of sense, and it built a really concrete worldview, and I'm like, I don't know that I can trust everyone else. I have to follow my savant information. But it made me throw the game so hard that everyone else was mad at me, and I'm like, I'm just reading the words I'm given. I'm playing off the script of what my character's doing. There's only so much I can, whether or not I can figure out I'm poisoned or not, it's really hard, So you're trying to play by the notes that you have, but you also have to be like, well, conceding that some other people are going to struggle with what you're doing or how you're interacting with them or whatever. You try and do your best to mend fences. It's the sportsmanship thing, right? Part of the rules is die with dignity, win with grace, or whatever it is. I don't think that is it verbatim, but it's along those lines. And the goal is that you as the storyteller is trying to run a fun game for the players. You need to be able to go from start to finish where everyone has a good time and then goes, yes, I would like to play again. Which is kind of the goal. And some of that means that your actually running of the game has to be pretty balanced, not actually set up to make anyone have a particularly horrible time. One of the worst games that I ran was I had an investigator that saw a marionette, which in my mind meant that the demon was one of 4 people, according to the investigator information. And in a 7-player game, that's not narrowing it down that much, right? But basically what happened was the investigator comes and goes, hey, I'm the investigator. I saw this guy or this guy as the marionette. And the first guy goes, oh, that's so shit. I'm just the marionette. And the person next to them immediately shut off and was no longer playing the game. They go, oh, they just know I'm the demon. I'm sure to die. I've just been instantly implicated for everyone publicly to execute. And it's like, well, a 7-player game goes for 3 days. They have 4 executions to make. And you can make the argument that that person was drunk or poisoned, because why would the storyteller ever show a marionette or whatever, right? And I was pretty new at the time, running the game. And after the game, they were like, I literally, like, player 1 in the investigator information was like, you should never storytell again. And it's like, that's really rough feedback to receive. But sometimes you gotta go, okay, look, yeah, I made a big mistake. I'm sorry I can't play it like that. I really wasn't expecting this to happen. I thought that there was some wiggle room for you to kind of argue that, but it didn't work out that way, and I'm sorry. We're not going to have that problem again. Don't worry about it. And then try and, rotating storytellers is a really good way to kind of help keep the storyteller like away from fatigue, because running a game can be really mentally taxing, and also means that you get to switch out and you get to alternate between playing and running, which is the thing that our group has started doing, where we'll have the storyteller alternate like pretty much nearly every game, or we won't run more than 2 in a session. To save on storyteller fatigue, because if you're grumpy and you've been running games for several hours and people are starting some shit, then it's going to be so much harder for you to be like, okay, it's cool, man. Anyway, that's my piece. I think it's an important tool in everyone's arsenal to think about, how am I going to deal with players that are having a bad time? Maybe they've left completely and they're really grumpy. Maybe they never want to play Clocktower again. Is there a way for you to kind of mend that fence? Is there a way for you to, politely solve the problem and like maybe help the game continue in such a way, or everyone takes like a breather and then comes back and plays, or just completely reset and keep it going? Because some of this stuff, it might happen, and when you're the storyteller in that situation, 12 people turn and look at you and they go, what do we do now? You kind of want to have an answer. So hopefully this video gives you some ideas about stuff that I've been through, how maybe that's supposed to be handled for the most part, because it's tough. It's kind of a shitty situation, and you just kind of have to deal with it. And what are you going to do? What's the best option in this scenario? You just kind of have to make a judgment call and stick to your guns. Really, that's it. We do a lot of on the Clocktower stuff where we talk about actually running the game. And I have done some actual like storyteller tips before about like actually like communicating with the players and like, hey, you have to be like really clear about the number of votes, who's nominated and stuff like that. And I think those kind of tips are just as important as talking about the mechanical stuff, because not everyone that plays and runs the board game night is super Mr. Social and a big extrovert. I'm sure as shit I'm not. And a really good communicator, a thing that the storyteller can potentially require of you depending on the group. So think about some of these skills and, maybe stick around, because we do have some other videos on the channel that handle this kind of thing, that talk about what storytelling is like and the kind of tips and skills that are required. So if you actually have a look on the screen, I will have a full playlist of Blood on the Clocktower stuff that can help get you started on your storytelling journey, as well as just a random video. Maybe this will be another cool Blood on the Clocktower stuff. Maybe it's a homebrew script that I made that you might enjoy. And as always, the subscribe button, which is the only way that the algorithm gods will bless you with other interesting content like this, where we talk about running the game, Blood on the Clocktower. So stick around, and hopefully you aren't the one leaving one of my games in future.